3 cars have to go, including this one, which I'm now becoming actually quite upset about. Hello and welcome back to the Volkswizard channel. Firstly, I'd like to say a big thanks to everybody who has watched the Cayman GT4 collection video. At this point, which is the morning after it was published, it's easily the most popular video I've ever made, and this motivates me to make more content with that car. In theory, tomorrow morning I'm going to point its elongated snout toward the Alps, aiming to triple the mileage it's covered in 3 years in just the course of a week. So look out for the content from that trip over the next few weeks. The unfortunate downside of buying that car is that 3 cars have to go, including this one, which I'm now becoming actually quite upset about. It is, of course, my Corrado VR6. So in today's video, we're going to get it out of the garage, which is a very rare thing, and I'm going to show you how it's evolved over the year or so since it was last on the channel, and we can share my last drive in it. But before we do that, I want to explain to you which cars are going, which cars are staying, and why. Now, I've taken heed of all your complaints of poor audio quality in previous videos, and I've completely changed the way I film these walk-around bits. Before, I used a GoPro Hero 4 on a stabilizer with a Rode wireless radio mic. A lot of you guys said you need to upgrade your mic. Well, I bought another mic and it made no difference because the problem was actually the GoPro Hero 4. It wasn't a waste of money though, because this Hollyland radio mic is a little bit smaller and lighter, and that means I can plug it into my iPhone 12, which I'm filming on now, and the receiver bit just sits on the lightning plug, and this is the transmitter bit here. No sort of lavalier mics to get tangled up and get unplugged as they often do. So hopefully the audio quality will be beyond reproach now. Okay, where do we start then? So the GT4 was incoming, and ideally I'd want to garage that because it's a precious car. So the Corrado, which has been in the garage since I moved here over a year ago, not been out really that many times, and not this summer at all, was going. Difficult choice, but you know, it just sits there. I love it, and if I could store it somewhere and actually look at it, I'd be really happy, but it's a tough choice, but it's got to go. Then I thought, well, actually, do I really need to garage the GT4? It might preserve it in some ways, but then I might damage it, things might fall on it. You know, I do use my garage, unlike a lot of people, and look at this red paint from previous occupants. So I took that as a warning, decided we'll just leave the GT4 out there. So do you think that means the Corrado can stay? Well, once I'd got my mind to it going, I realised actually there's a better car to put in this garage, and that is not this one. This one, the Mark II Golf GTI 8 valve, bought it in December, coincidentally from the guy who sold me the Corrado. And this was on the channel in the beginning of 2023, and I actually got a bodywork quote from a lovely company in Daventry. It turned out to be getting on for £3,500. Quotes varied from half that to that, but this was a company I really, really trusted, but I couldn't really spend that much money on the paint and then leave it outside. I've never really left cars outside till I moved here, and now I'm realising that it's just not really that good for them. So I want to get onto this project, but it needs to have garage space, and that means the Corrado's got to go. I can't do anything else to the Corrado. It's kind of pretty much completed as a project with regards to what I can do, and whilst I'd love to keep it, you know, I really want to get this project going, not least because I want to get this car finished, but also because it'll make good content for the channel. So it's sad, but yeah, got to move on. Onto the Mark V Edition 30, again bought in about February, and it was on the channel earlier in the year. It's kind of dropped off. It was used as a daily car from February once I got it running okay, and I stopped using it at the end of July, I think. Started using the Up GTI, which we'll talk about in a sec. It's been sawn for I think August and September. I'm going to reuse it in October. This will now become my daily car, though it will be joined by something more practical and more economical, which should halve my fuel bills. So I'll probably use them, you know, mix up the driving with those 2 cars. It's a car off a friend who's waiting for his Mark 8 to arrive at the dealer, so hopefully I'll get that car really soon. So keep a look at it. It's a car all you guys should be able to relate to in some way. Up GTI, yeah, I can't see it anywhere. Got a confession to make. I sold it, and that's why it's not here. The reason I sold it was because After driving it for a month and working out what I needed to do to the suspension to make it how I wanted it to be, unfortunately, I contacted Bilstein and they said 10 to 12 weeks before they could supply the parts. That's a long time in YouTube. It might mean I can't even get it done this year. So I figured that I'll sell it, get the money back in, and then buy another one when I can actually get the parts. And trust me, we're going to do that project, but it might be right at the end of this year or into next year. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Club Sport Air still here, purchased in February. Yeah, I had a kind of busy few months buying cars. I guess I'm kind of catching up with selling them now. So this was the sister car to my original one that I bought brand new in 2016. It's been on track twice in the UK. It's been to the Nürburgring. I've done a few thousand miles in it. But apart from that, I really love just driving it. It's just a nice car to get in and drive. It's not particularly taxing to drive normally. It's got CarPlay, heated seats. The bucket seats aren't too restrictive. It's brilliant. So this isn't going to go anywhere. I plan to keep this one forever because I missed my other one so much. I actually did plan to keep the Boxster GTS forever, but that was a little bit naive because I only bought this because I was looking for a GT4, and that urge, yeah, kind of became a lot stronger after I visited the Porsche Museum back in July. I think they put something in the coffee. So yeah, within a few weeks that turned up, and whilst I'd love to keep this, it's not going to do it any good sitting outside over the winter. So yeah, if you're interested, get in touch, Andrew at Volkswizard.co.uk. It's a lovely spec, really nice condition, and obviously I've done loads of work to it to bring it up to the standards that Porsche would probably be happy to approve. Yeah, GT4, again, no plans to sell this. It's still a bit scary. It did go sideways with a tiny prod of the throttle when it was wet, when I was taking it to Porsche Solihull. Traction control on, Cup 2s, a bit dicey, but I don't want to take them off. I want to drive it when it's safe to drive on Cup 2s, and when it's not, I'll just have to drive really carefully. But I want to learn to drive better a mid-engine car, rear-wheel drive car. So there's a lot to learn with this car. Probably hoping not to have to learn it on the road, because that's probably a bit more dangerous. So maybe Porsche Experience Centre or some other sort of safer event. But yeah, not going anywhere apart from, yeah, maybe to Austria in a couple of, like tomorrow. Okay, now let's get Splodge out the garage and the Corrado VR6. Well, I'm really glad it's sunny today because you can see the car in all its glory. This is the kind of light when Corrados can look a bit rough, to be perfectly honest. And that's because most of them are over 30 years old. Most have done well over 100,000 miles. They'll be chippy, they'll be scratched, they'll be multiple different shades of the original colour. And the reason this one looks so good is because a lot of time, effort and money, most definitely, have gone into the body, and that, by the way, was only worth doing because underneath is really, really solid, and that's definitely not the case with a lot of Corrados. So I'd say about £5,000 has gone into making it look so good, plus the wheels and numerous other little bits and pieces. The bodywork was about £3,500 for a full windows out respray, and I think they probably wish they'd charged a bit more, even though that quote was originally half that. And that would tie in with the Mark II, which is nowhere near a full respray, and they're looking at £3,500 for that. So do not underestimate the cost of making a Corrado VR6 look this good. There are going to be cheaper ones on Auto Trader, maybe even Storms, lower mileage as well. But if they're tatty, honestly, it's really, really hard to make them look good. It's not helped by a lot of the parts being unavailable as well. So yeah, that's it. Still a great looking car, and classic green is amazing. I was watching a seen through glass video, and he was saying green is one of the most popular colours that people pick for Porsches on the paint to sample scheme, and I can see why. It's definitely come back in again after about 20 years in the doldrums. The brake discs are a bit rusty, by the way, because when I washed it, it rained and I couldn't go and drive it. So they'll clear up on the test drive. Out here, I haven't really done an awful lot. Changed the number plates to these ones from retro plates. This is sort of the middle typeface. There's a more retro one I've gone for on the Mark II, you'll see in due course. There's obviously the more modern one that's everywhere these days, but this I felt was right for the mid-90s. Or at the front, by the way, all the lights are intact and unchipped. So wheels refurbished by Prestige Wheel Centre. They've all got Toyos on them, 205, 50, 15, the correct size. All the black wheel nut caps are there as well. Okay, let me show you a couple of things inside. Actually, 3 things. Just have a good look at the seat. So it's not ripped, it's not been repaired, bolstered a little bit hollow, but the seats are in great condition, front and back. And I think there's a first aid kit in there, yeah. Okay, first up is, probably going to be really hard to show you in this light, but I replaced the bulbs that illuminate the LCD bits on the instrument cluster. One had blown, but I got 2 just to make sure they were the right amount of light, and yeah, pretty easy 4 screws out here too on the instrument cluster. Changed the stereo. This car came with a really gaudy Kenwood head unit with a massive CD player in there taking up the whole glove box. I fitted a Sony XR659 RDS, which, well, I was old enough to remember that it should be retro correct for this correct period part for this car, and it makes a brilliant noise that will evoke fond memories for a lot of you guys if you're kind of my age or maybe a little bit younger as well. So it's turn the key off, and you should take the face off to stop people nicking your stereo. Well, that's the theory. So it gives you a little reminder tone. Did you hear that, guys? That brings back so many memories for me. And it works. It works. So it's perfectly fine. Still can't get over the fact the ABS light comes on and goes off. That's really important on Corrados. Really expensive to fix if it doesn't. So keep an eye out for that. A lot of people just unplug them, and most buyers wouldn't notice until you ram the brakes on and you crash. Another little job was to retrim the sunroof trim panel. This was really tatty. The headlining was okay. So I had this done by a company in Birmingham in similar fabric. It's a little bit thicker, so it can sometimes stick. So you just have to keep an eye on that. But the sunroof works. I had that done before the paint worked, because if the sunroof's not working, you can end up damaging the paint on the sunroof panel. So that's all good. I'll just show you. So that's close, and that's open. I used bits from a Mark III, so I bought a complete sunroof assembly for a Mark III and just nicked the bits I needed. There are some things that aren't compatible, but the bits that break are, so it should be good for a long time. Okay, so that's 3 things in here. Now let's have a look under the bonnet. Okay, so in here I haven't really done an awful lot. The plan was to take it to stealth racing, get the timing chain done with the clutch, but just really haven't had the budget to do that. You don't need to do it. You can still enjoy it as it is. Something to think about in the future though. So it's all nice and original down here. I've given it a little bit of a clean, I haven't gone crazy. There's bits of gluey residue on the engine which I'll get off. There's a bit of corrosion on the battery tray, but there's actually a repair piece for that that's not too hard to do if you want to get that done. Other than that, it's still lovely and solid. Original panels, I think, apart from the driver's door, which I replaced because there's a little bit of rust. Wasn't bad at all. Okay, so under here, Corrados have got a soundproofing, actually a number of soundproofing pads that are glued to the bonnet. When I got the car, Alan had taken them off because they do decay and they look horrible, and he'd left a bit of gluey residue on the bonnet, which I finally got around to getting off, I think just yesterday, because this stuff arrived from Manol, 14 quid delivered for 5 litres of tar and glue remover. I was a bit dubious because that's about half the price of TARDIS, but it's brilliant. Brilliant. And it smells nice. It smells like an old lady's house, which is a bit disconcerting. So with that cleaned off, I then had to get these bits. Can't get them from Volkswagen, obviously, but I found some on eBay from a German company that look pretty correct, and they're at 70 quid delivered. There is a guy who does them for the forum called Dreadnought Customs, and he has actually got the later bonnet still in stock, because they're two different types of bonnet. I don't know why I went for the German ones, but I thought made the wrong move, because Dreadnoughts have got this bit soundproofed with a pad there. And I thought this was wrong, but I looked at some pics of ones I've sold in the past, and the original soundproofing pads stop there, and that's probably because the bonnet is arched. It's not flat, and these bits are a lot lower, and I reckon it would make contact with the washer tank, so that's why it's not there. Yeah, little nerdy thing. That looks great now. And the other thing I've done is an oil change, even though I've not really used the car, so it's ready to go. So yeah, speaking of which, let's now go for a drive and reacquaint ourselves with how a Corrado VR6 feels on the road. These are the kind of roads where the Corrado really excelled back in the 90s. It was very hard for car manufacturers, maybe aside from the French, to get cars to go around corners that well. The Mark III Golf in pretty much every guise, including VR6, was pretty terrible. But somehow, and it's probably because it's a mixture of Mark II Golf front sat rear, it seemed to work, even with that big heavy engine sat over or in front of the front axle. This car's done 148,000 miles. I'm not sure if it's had an awful lot done to its suspension, but it still feels good. You know, it's still enjoyable to drive. The steering's maybe not as direct as it could be, but I think that's just cars from the 90s. There's always this background burble from the VR6 engine, even when you're just pottering along. We're doing 2,500 RPM now. You need to get it a little bit higher to properly hear its voice. Gear shift is long, but it's actually really precise. Third to second is one of the hardest shifts to do, and it's really, really slick. Of course, being a car from the 90s, it's a small, narrow thing, which means that on roads like this you're not looking ahead for other traffic. I guess we should talk about the brakes. We've got ABS, but it's a car from the 90s, not the best era for brakes. Having said that, it's not over servoed, which a lot of modern cars suffer from, so that's just, yeah, I can feel the ABS working there. Okay, we've got some temperature in the oil. Now it's time to remind ourselves of that VR6. How? Some said it sounded like a Ferrari back in the 90s. Very believable. It's so smooth. It's just a shame that when they stuck this in the Golf, the suspension was so bad. You could upgrade it, many people do. Coney Iback back in the day had a great car then, but the standard, it was really weird because this engine is so nice, it just feels so at home in this car. And we've got the Jetex exhaust, which, as you can probably hear, it's not loud, it's very similar to OEM, it looks OEM. It'll probably last as long as the OEM one, if not longer. They did last for quite a long time, but by the time they'd started to corrode, Volkswagen deleted them from their parts catalogue. Another reason, apart from it being really solid, that it was worth investing all this time and money in it, was because it came with a folder full of receipts back to day one. And most importantly, previous owner Alan didn't spend any money on the bodywork, but he spent a lot of money at Stealth Racing keeping on top of it mechanically. And aside from a caliper I had to do for an MOT, it's needed nothing else, and it drives so well. Okay, it's my last drive in this car, unless things change and I can keep it. So rather than just drive around these roads, I thought we'd go somewhere special where older cars like this are really welcome. Well, welcome back to Jilks' Garage Cafe. I have filmed here a lot in the past and pleased to see it's still thriving on this Saturday afternoon. There's an hour-long wait for food, but it is well worth it. We're very lucky in Warwickshire because we've got Cafe and Machine up the road, and here at Jilks' Garage Cafe, they kind of have a really good following with the classic car community. They have a lot of people booking out their rear car park for meets, and we get all sorts of weird stuff down here. I think that was a bike, but I can't be too sure. Anyway, yeah, blown away. So yeah, last drive for the Corrado, perfect place to come. I don't really want to sell it, and I'm going to make it hard to sell by being insistent that I won't take less than 10 grand for it. Like I said, the bodywork is 5 grand and a lot of hassle, so if you're looking at other cars, make sure you see them in a good light, because I'm pretty sure they will look pretty rough unless they've had a good paint job, and if they had a good paint job, that's going to cost a lot of money. So as ever guys, thanks for watching this Volkswizard video. Keep subscribing, keep commenting, and I'll see you for the next one very soon.